Worlds Apart, Chapter 4. The case unfolds on both sides. Apparently, Yeonju had been gone for hours. Her father had come back in the front door some time ago, not smelling significantly of alcohol, but weirdly smelling of bleach. Subong had told him about how worried they'd been, only to discover she was gone. "I can't explain now," she said shakily, "but I think I know what's going on." Subong, though excitable, was more sensibly minded than many wannabe comics writers, or, in fact, many wannabe surgeons. He heard the tension in her voice and volunteered to drive her home. Since her dad seemed to have gone to sleep, they locked up and left. Chul was gazing at the bank of flowers he'd been sent, more meditative than anything, when So-hee glided in. He grinned at her, and she lifted an eyebrow. "While I have been single-handedly running your company, you have nothing better to do than gloat over your flowers, I see." "Actually," he said with dignity, "I've been seriously considering the future." "If you're considering that, I think I'll have Secretary Go send over some cases for you to work on." Do-yoon chuckled from where he had gotten comfortable in the suite sitting area. "If there was anything interesting happening at the office, I know you would have told me," Chul said. "But I'd be happy to take on a little work. What brings you here today?" "What, a friend can't come visit the invalid?" She sat, or rather perched lightly, on the end of his bed. "You were here every day for a while. Lately you've gotten back to normal routine, and that's great. So I don't think you'd come just for a social call." For the briefest moment, So-hee showed a trace of annoyance, but she just said, "Fine. I wanted to ease into it, but we finally got the results back. Bad news, all of that woman's information is bogus. The facial recognition software couldn't uncover anything either." "It's still experimental," Chul said automatically, but his mind was running along the track of what So-hee had said about his mysterious savior. Earlier this week, she'd given the same kind of report on his equally mysterious would-be murderer. Did they run a check for any lapsed female surgeons who might be underground? "Yes, you mentioned that early on. Though I'm not surprised you don't remember. You were still pretty heavily medicated." Her voice was gentle, though So-hee was usually a chic girl who kept feelings to herself. Chul felt a twist of guilt briefly. So-hee cared about him, even though their brief romance had been as painful as it was disastrous. Neither of them found being open about their inner thoughts easy, and while on paper they worked as a power couple, the reality was the opposite. "Thank you," he said. "I'll continue to pull on some of those threads, but for now it's not a major concern for the company. Anything new in the Alpha case?" Amazing how easily he was able to refer to it, with a case title to make it impersonal. "Nothing new," she said, equally breezy, "but there is a pretty good development with your infrared camera redesign. The police chief is impressed and thinks if he puts in a good word, he can get a developer to take on manufacturing it." "We'll have to talk with lawyer Kim about whether we want to get an outside manufacturer involved," Chul said, "and whether we'd make it available to the police through a second party." "He could come and have a meeting with you here if you wish." "I'm hoping to be out by the end of the week." "If you don't think the delay will matter, that's fine." Chul looked hard at her. "Do you think rushing to have a meeting, where my attorney will actually see me in hospital robes, rather than just hear I'm in recovery after an accident, will be better for business?" She gave a short, brittle laugh and conceded. She left soon after, and Chul drew out a much-worn notebook from under his covers. After many years of almost nothing to add to this personal record of the Alpha case, he now at least had more questions to write down. "Kang Chul," said Do-yoon, surprising him, "you know I admire you for your perseverance." "Yes?" "But I think sometimes you could do with a little less intensity and a little more feeling." "If you're talking about So-hee," Chul said dryly, "I'm never going to date her. You can feel free to ask her out." Do-yoon probably knew as much as anyone what had gone on with So-hee, but steadfastly pretended not to. As Chul expected, the suggestion made him blush and busy himself in yesterday's newspaper again. Chul once again found his thread of thought. Attacker. 2. 1 solid, 1 without substance. He had always had unusually keen senses. It had made him miserable as a boy, but when he'd honed it for accuracy in shooting, he'd also discovered a method of training that gave him an edge in many areas. His hearing being acute meant he was able to nearly play back a given moment and analyze it. The strangeness of that day with the attacker had not been just the hollow blur where a face should be. In calmer moments of reflection, he realized that there had been no sound, no breath, no movement of cloth. When he'd gone into that alley, pressing away from that locus he usually followed without question, his senses had seemed similarly muffled. He suspected it was because there had been no stimulus. Why that was, he couldn't yet say. He had written down exacting reports of those moments and could only try to shake the pieces together and sift them out again to find answers. He did not really remember the woman who had intervened after he had been stabbed. He couldn't justify yet his certainty. But he was sure he had seen her that day when, as if transported, he arrived in the wrong hospital lobby, where she had been talking with a man about him and Sohee. Why is she the one you want to track down so badly? Sohee had asked when he was coming out of the medication haze. Do you think she's partly responsible? I mean, she did some serious damage, but the doctors all agree it was a measure taken to save your life, and it probably did. I think she's the key to my life, he'd said. Sohee had taken that to be a melodramatic statement about his gratitude. However, he was being literal. When he had looked at her, his bones seemed to hum, similar to the way the attacker with the knife made him icy, at a level beyond emotion. Something strange was happening, and he couldn't explain it away. In an investigation, if the common sense answer was impossible, the next thing to examine was the improbable.